Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's 10-Minute Tales. This is called The Curse of Kartoum by Harry Riley. So what's it to be for this year's little jolly lads? Benidorm again? We need to make a decision, while some of us are still sober enough to drink straight. We don't want another disaster like last year, when our jerry-built digs turned out to be infested with giant cockroaches and we all got laid up with Deli Belly from Hell's Kitchen curry. Kenneth Bates, master plumber and captain of the Crippled Crow, champion darts team, leaned back in his chair and supped lovingly at his pint of heavy. Paul Perkins spoke up. "Sorry mates, count me out. I'm saving up to get married, and Dolores won't think too kindly of me swanning off for a week of debauchery." Knowing his absence would put extra strain on the group kitty, he threw in another name to soften the blow. "Can I ask our Austin to join you? You all know him. He's been scorer at one or two of our matches before." Ignoring the doubtful looks from some of his pals, and a stage whisper from Eric Heathcote about the nerd, Paul hastened to add, "His dad's loaded and he's very generous with his money. That should sweeten the pot for you." Ken asked for a vote, and reluctantly the motion was carried. Right, next item on the agenda is where do we go? Any suggestions? No? Well, I've always had a yen for somewhere windswept and interesting. How's about a trip to the Sudan, General Gordon land, to ride on a camel? I can just see Grinning Johnny on one just now. They all laughed at John Meadows, known as Grinning Johnny, owing to his skull-like face. This familiar turn also distinguished him from John Black, their other darts teammate. Kenneth Bates was trusted and admired for his good judgment. And since nobody else could think of a better idea, the second vote of the day was carried unanimously. Kartoum it was. Paul rang cousin Austin, and he said he would be honoured to join them, admitting that he lived a quiet life and didn't have many friends. The darts captain was informed and promptly made the booking at their local travel agent for all 6 members for the first week in June. It was game on. And in any group of people there is often one person who doesn't quite fit in, for some reason. He or she gets picked on, no matter how hard they try. And so it was with Austin. It wasn't just that he was painfully shy, but it was probably more to do with the fact that he was more academic than the others. He'd been to grammar school, whereas the others were hands-on artisans. Someone would crack a joke, and they'd all have a laugh, and that would be the end of it. But not so with Austin. He would have to analyse and dissect it to death, until one of the others, usually Eric, would get so bored that he'd tell him to belt up, insisting nobody loves a clever dickie. When it came to room sharing, they literally drew straws as to who would share one of the 3 bedrooms with him. It was Eric, the unfortunate, the stage whisperer, who drew the short straw. After they'd enjoyed relaxing for a day, enjoying the sights and sounds of Kartoum, a camel guide called Akbara made contact with them. He would take them on the morrow out into the desert and show them the real Sudan of his forefathers. He proudly told them of his tribal background. "I am of the Ramaja." The next day, with great excitement and much hilarity, they eventually mounted their spitting beasts and set off noisily into the unknown. But what they couldn't know was that Akbara was leading them into a trap. Once they were miles from anywhere, he produced a horn and sounded a long drawn-out note, which echoed around the desert wastelands. Minutes later an answering call came back, and a band of fierce camel riders appeared, as if by magic. All merriment came to an abrupt halt as the holiday-makers realised they'd been duped. At the mercy of the bearded and heavily armed robbers, they were divested of their mobile phones. watches, money and outer garments, and left to fend for themselves, waterless in the heat of the day. Akbara laughed, and taking the camels, went off with the bandits. The Crippled Crow champions sat down in the dust, wailing and waiting to die. But cometh the moment, cometh the man. Nobody noticed Austin was missing until he returned, struggling with a large square rock. "Wake up, fellas, look at this. Isn't it brilliant? See, it's carved. Ancient Nubian stone, from the 5th millennium BC. Grinning Johnny wasn't grinning anymore, and Eric was thirsty and fed up. And he couldn't see why Austin was so excited. "So, what do you want us to do? Die laughing? I bet there's plenty more where that came from, you dickhead." Austin was not to be put off, and while his comrades, metaphorically speaking, buried their heads in the sand, he went back and began hunting for more. After an hour or so, he'd amassed a large pile of similar stones from the flat, barren landscape. When the others came along to scoff, sneering and jeering at his excavating madness, they asked what it meant to him. Eric insisted that only Austin could think of starting an archaeological dig on the last day of his life. And Samuel Smithers, the Scouser, agreed, but took a more conciliatory approach, asking again, "What does it mean to you, Austin?" "Oh, nothing really, except that if I'm right, there's a pyramid under here that's been buried for centuries, and if we can find the entrance, we could shelter from the heat and freezing cold of the night. We might even survive until a rescue patrol comes looking for us." Suddenly it all made sense, and so they all pitched in until, exhausted and with bleeding hands, they uncovered a hidden entrance step. Inside the dark and musty interior they found a mummy's tomb, surrounded by the dead king's gold and jewels. But Austin persuaded them to crawl about on the floor, as he was sure they would find a damp patch, marking the site of an underground spring. He claimed the kings were always buried with their own source of water for the next life. And so it turned out to be. And it was his reluctant roommate, Eric, who found it. That night and for several more the champions survived, with fresh water and shelter, until help arrived. It happened as Ken Bates arose, popping out of the ground like some subterranean cave dweller, and startling a party of loud American tourists driving past in their big Hummer convoy. Braking suddenly, the second vehicle almost careered into the leader, and then the other. Strangely, underclad champions emerged, giving vent to hearty cheers. Austin the Unwanted was unloved no more. He was the hero who had saved their lives and made them fabulously welcome, fabulously wealthy into the bargain.